I'm Brooke Berman, and I'm the writer of Hunting and Gathering and The Liddy Plays.
Well, we're moving on up.
If you had to describe the Liddy Plays to an audience that's not necessarily familiar with it, how would you summarize it?
I would call it a cycle of short, interconnected plays about a brother and sister who are seeking and learning. The Liddy Plays was written over a really long period of time because that first section in the hospital, I wrote, that was the second play I ever wrote.
The Liddy Plays
it was
was?
a one act. Well, it was just that first piece with Liddy and Stephen in the hospital. I wrote it in a few weeks in Pittsburgh. I was my ex-boyfriend and I were in Pittsburgh, and I was like, I guess I should be writing. And I'd only written Wonderland before. I'd written the Naked Angels play, which was 8 minutes long, and then I'd written a 30-minute one act called Generation X in Love, and then Wonderland, and then I wrote that first chunk of the Liddy Plays, Liddy and the Mad Hatter. And that was 1996. And then when I got into Juilliard a year or two later, I wrote the third section, Liddy and Emerson. And then it was just the two of them. And then I wrote that long monologue independently of the two of them. And I thought, oh, that's going to go in between. And then it was the three. And then they got workshopped in 1999. And it was just the three pieces. And I thought, I think there's more to this story. And then we workshopped them again, I guess 2 years later, and I wrote that fourth piece.
Yeah. So it was over a long period of time.
Yeah, longer than most plays.
Yeah. So I'm just curious, with you pluralized the title The Liddy Plays, but it plays out as one continuous piece. Was that a choice, or?
The idea was that they can work as components, that theoretically you could do them as standalone pieces, or you could do them all together, or you could mix up the order, theoretically, or maybe I'll write another Liddy play someday, that it felt a little like, I think I was really inspired by the Glass family stories, all those Salinger stories about the same characters, and the way that he tracks them, and he, over different periods of their lives, and sort of one story is Franny and Zoe, and then one story is about Seymour, and then there's another, and so I liked that.
Do you think you'll write another Liddy play?
Who knows? It's possible.
Yeah. So, in the Liddy Plays, you seem to question the fuzzy line between insanity and spirituality. Can you talk a bit about the characters, Liddy's mother and Stephen, and what they symbolize for you?
I don't know. I mean, I think when I first started the Liddy Plays and I was in my 20s, I would have said, these people should not be medicated, we should be listening to them, I really believe when Liddy says, let's take Stephen to the Dharma, let's take him to a cave in the mountain and have the Dalai Lama heal him. And at, 20 years later, I'm 40 now, I don't know, I've seen people really be helped by the mental health. I think the mental health thing is so fucked. I was really interested in the 90s. It was before, September 11th, obviously, and before the economy tanked, and before so many of the really palpable problems we have in this country were at play. It was an affluent time in America. America was okay, and we were in the sort of .com boom. There were people in their 20s making significant amounts of money. A lot of things felt very possible, and yet there was this, wave of upper middle class depressed white people. And I thought,
the first white girl problem.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I thought maybe the problem isn't the individual psyche. Maybe the problem is that there's something the culture isn't offering them, that there's some depth, there's some piece of meaning that we need that we're not getting. What is it that we need to change societally before we start changing all of our brain chemistry? And and I was interested in stories of people who had sort of dropped off the grid and located meaning. And I remember reading Sylvia Plath's The Bell Jar and thinking, there's nothing wrong with this girl. This girl seems fine to me. I would hang out with her. She just seems a little intense. But, I worked at Condé Nast. She's describing it pretty accurately. So, and again, I mean, 20 years ago, that all felt really straightforward to me. 20 years later, it feels less straightforward.
Right.
I mean, I think there are people who are genuinely suffering who need to be medicated. But I don't know. I think there are a lot of other people who feel a sort of death in their soul or a lack of meaning that need to be encouraged to go find meaning.
So, can you talk about the character Liddy then specifically and what you think she's searching for?
What do I think she's searching for? I mean, Liddy, I think, is a complicated character too, because on the one hand, she has these very high-minded ideas about the very things we're talking about, spirituality and the value of suffering and sort of the noble savage from the utopian books. But on the other hand, she's also got this crazy mother who raised her, and I think, you know, for those of us who were raised with unstable parents, there's a kind of like radar or like magnetic quality to people that feel a lot like her parents. So the fact that Liddy's throwing herself at Stephen is completely inappropriate. And I think, you know, Stephen reminds her of her mom. So there's a way that she grew up with this kind of high level intensity.
And drama,
exactly. And without realizing it, she's recreating that in her adult life. And that's why at the end of that first play, she has to crash so she can rebuild herself. And that's why we go backwards in time, actually, in the way it's put together, that, you know, she has that moment where she crashes.
Yeah.
And we as the audience go back, you know, almost like a website to the place where the trauma started. And then I think we go to like 19 and then 16 and then forward.
Do you think there's a piece of you in all the characters you write? I mean, whether it's
of course,
purposeful or not?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And then,
how can that not be?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like when you're an actor and you use yourself to find your characters, and that might be literal, like, you know, I literally had a friend in a psychiatric hospital who I spent a lot of time visiting in my 20s, who, you know, who I wrote about in the memoir and who clearly inspired the first part of the play. But, like, did the events of the play happen in real life? No. Yeah. I think the part that's autobiographical is you know, when I talk about this in the memoir, I felt this compulsion to... I wouldn't have said I was saving him at the time. I said that I was enjoying him. Like, it was really fun to go hang out with him. I myself was recovering from having been raped that year. And so, I mean, a lot of the other things my friends who in their 20s were doing weren't exactly satisfying to me, because I had this incredible hunger in my soul from having gone through what I went through, and I was trying to like reconcile big questions. So it was really comforting to sit with. I mean, it was really comforting to be with somebody else who was in crisis, because he was asking big questions and I was asking big questions, and then we could laugh about it. But we weren't like playing board games. Do you know what I mean? We were like, I don't know. And then I realized that I had to let him go and kind of go through I started getting really attached to the idea of his care in a way that wasn't appropriate. And so I gave that to Liddy. I put that in the writing.
Yeah.
But then the rest of the journey was hers. And
so you start from with you. And
then the characters take over. I love that brother character, Emerson. I don't have a brother, but I love that guy.
Yeah.
And I've spent quite a bit of time, you know, in Buddhist practice, and the guy was really fun to write. Yeah. And the meditation instructor was really fun to write. I love, you know, there's this wonderful Buddhist writer, psychotherapist, Mark Epstein, who's written about the relationship between meditation and psychotherapy. And I love the scene with the meditation instructor, where the meditation instructor is saying, you know, you don't need therapy. You need to like look at your mind. You need to watch your breath. And then by the end, he or she is like, oh, actually, maybe you should go to therapy. Like, maybe that would be helpful.
Do you ever feel like you write a character and that's like what you're going through, that's who you are, and then just like 10 years later you look back and you're like, that's just not at all who I am anymore?
No, that hasn't happened yet.
No.
But it might.
What advice would you give to Crashbox as young artists and as a budding theater company?
Oh, wow. Do the work you love. Do the work you love, especially now, because you can. Because there's no one telling you not to. Because you can find ways to do it for nothing. Do the work you love. Just keep doing the work you love and see where it leads you. And don't let anybody tell you no. When someone says no, they're talking about their own limitation, not yours.